Hey everyone, welcome to the Siege and Sandfox development live stream. I'm the designer, Chris, and today what I'm going to do is just kind of talk through what I've been doing during the week, basically. So just to let you know, the kind of plan for me is that I figure what I'll do is I will do a kind of more casual stream on Thursday, just to kind of go through what I've been doing during the week, and the more prepared, organized, here's a specific thing, is the Tuesday thing. So anyway, blah, 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 let's hop over to what I've been doing. So as any of you have been following me on Twitter or the like will know, sorry, let me just quickly refresh this thing. Will know that primarily I've been focusing on the AI stuff and kind of redoing a lot of my old work there because I started it over a year ago and I've learned a hell of a lot about how the AI actually works and kind of what I do and don't like about my implementation of it. So let's just have a look at what I had before. Let me pull this over. So this is the old one. I talked about this a bit before, so I'll kind of skim over it. It's grown very large and very complicated. And it's very dependent on things I put in right at the start that I don't actually use very much anymore. For example, everything was based upon suspicion. And suspicion was this idea of seeing something, and notice I'd say seeing because that's the thing that was focused entirely on sight. Seeing something, gradually becoming aware of it, and then chasing after it. And then everything we added later, like extended searching and hearing and stuff, was kind of a weird hack on top of that. So I wanted to fix that, and I also wanted to fix just how deep and wide this tree was becoming. So let me show you what I've been working on. Just pop over here. So here's what I have now. It's quite a lot smaller. It doesn't quite have all the functionality yet, but it's a lot more contained. And something else actually I should mention is you see the attached blackboard here, the set of keys, like the things I want the AI to remember and bits of information I want to use. This got way out of hand. Let's have a look. Oh dear. Yeah, this is bad. And if something's got hack in the title, it's probably not a good idea to keep it. So let's tackle one thing at a time. So in the old one, suspicion was the main thing, and that was ran as a service. Let's bring that guy back again, actually. So that was ran as a service. And you can see it ticked every half second, which meant all the time, whether it was even relevant or not, it was going, hey, can I see something? Can I see something? Can I see something? And you know what? In terms of actual sort of performance, it wasn't causing any problems, but it caused problems in other ways because everything else in this tree was event driven. And so it would just happen once and I could control that flow, but this wasn't. So I had to put in weird hacks to do that. So you'll notice here, it's not there. And none of these branches off here, none of the decorators for this are actually checking for suspicion. All they care about is, well, predominantly they care about two things. They care about if I have a target, which is the same idea as before. That will be, I haven't implemented it yet, but that will be the player. Like, is the AI looking at the player, not looking at something near the player, excuse me, not looking at some kind of secondary source of the player, a door they left open or whatever, looking straight at them. I either care if you're looking at the player or you're looking at this thing that I've called an interest source. Now I'll dive into that a bit later, but that could be any of those secondary sources I've talked about. And the thing is with that, it's not a constant check. You have one interest and then you move on to another one and then maybe you stop caring, all that sort of stuff. So where did suspicion go? So suspicion has moved into the AI controller now because it kind of makes more sense. So another good thing to mention is everything is driven by Unreal's perception system. And the main event you want to get a hold of for the perception system is this on-target perception updated. Now I do a bit of filtering here just to kind of collect things in the order I want, and I make a couple of little structs. But all we really care about is we get that event and then we're feeding that into seeing or hearing. And you'll notice here this is quite compact. I've got some nice little functions here. And again, for comparison, if we bring over how this used to work, oh dear, this got out of hand as well. So lots of little things. And lots of times when you've got, question marks where you're going, does this belong here? It works, but probably shouldn't be here. So that's gone. So let's have a look at how that works. As I said before, if we just focus on sight to start with, before what happened was we had a service in the behavior tree that was firing every half second, regardless of what was going on. And generally what it was doing was going, anytime I check and I can't see anything, my suspicion goes down. Anytime I check and I can see something, my suspicion goes up. but that would happen even if it was nothing had changed, even if I hadn't seen anything for multiple checks, etc., etc. So I wanted to fix that. So if we think about the process here, we get the event that says we've seen something, and then I've made this function called process suspicion. So if we hop in here, this is also quite simple. And all I'm doing here is, all I care about is if it was sent now or not. Because you can successfully sense something or successfully stop sensing something. So that's for sight, obviously that's quite obvious. It's like you can see it, you can't. So I filter by that. And then what I'm doing now is similar to the other setup, but I've got a bit more control in that I'm using timers and events. So I still have my suspicion increase, and it will still loop to a certain point. But the difference is here that when you hop into this event, if we go in here, what I'm doing is I'm going, okay, I'm checking what view cone you're in, I'm checking what the suspicion is, and when I reach the maximum, I'm going to do a thing, like I'm going to discover it, and that fires off some other things, and crucially, I'm going to stop this timer, so you're not going to keep firing this event over and over again, it will just stop. And the other time that would happen is, if I go back in here, is obviously if we switch from being seen to not being seen or vice versa, I stop the other timer. So I go, okay, the one that was increasing or decreasing, turn you off now. We don't care. And we just turn on the other one. And then if we look at it here, it's basically the same, right? Suspicion either goes up or down, but when you reach naught suspicion, we're not going to keep ticking the timer because that's unnecessary. And equally, I keep losing the one I want. Equally, when we reach a certain sort of predetermined threshold, what we're doing then is feeding into my interest source system, which is where this concept of discovery comes in. So there might be a little bit more to talk about before I go straight into the interest stuff. So interest source, that's the next thing, right? If you've seen something for long enough and it's not the player, we're calling that an interest source. What do you want to know about this interest source? Like, what are the things you'd want the AI to remember about this? And that's what these keys are for. Now, I'm thinking about, I can probably roll these into a single struct or some other element and probably put out the bits I want. But as I was figuring it out, it was just kind of helpful to have them all as separate keys. So what I have here is literally the object that instigated this, the source itself. I have which sense generated it. I have another string for type, which I'm not quite sure what I'm going to use for yet. I guess it's equivalent to a tag. Stuff related to the player, stuff that's definitely not related to the player, level of threat, something like that. But it's just something I've got the space to have. And finally, there's a priority. Now, the idea is that if we pop back over to this, the idea is that when the AI discovers something, so imagine it's seen something and it's staring at it, it has the opportunity to discover it. And basically, discovery, you'll pretty much always discover something unless you've already discovered it. That's what my check is to cover. And then beyond that, there's a kind of back and forth between the object and the AI. So if discovery is successful, you can see here, I've got this thing that I'm calling update interest record. And I say, hey, here's the interest source that I sensed. Here's how I sensed it in terms of which AI sense triggered it. What do you think? So if we hop in here, if I recall, the check is pretty basic in that, yes, so I set the priority, I set the priority of the one we're checking, and I look in the AI's brain in the blackboard and see if it's got one already and what priority that is. And it's just a straight up comparison, right? So you go, check they're not the same. If they are the same, that's something I need to handle, but I don't yet. I suspect the correct answer there is that if you get two interests at the same priority, focus on the one that happened most recently, but I'm not, one step at a time. So assuming they're not the same, I look at whichever one was better. If the old one is still a higher priority, I just say nope, but I let you know that it failed. And if the newer one is high priority, all this is doing is just sticking all that stuff back into the AI blackboard and saying, hey, your record was updated. So if I go back, how did I get there? So many files I've been working on recently, excuse me. Here, reset. Yes, right. So let's assume that this interest we saw is of higher priority. So what happens next? So if that's true, we get to this branch, and then basically the final step is that the AI says, so this is still from AI controller perspective, the AI controller says, okay, I am now interested in you. And as you can see, like, I'm trying to keep the terminology quite strict. Saying I'm interested means something quite specific. It means you are now the interest record in the AI Blackboard, and we have an association. So if we hop over to this, can I do that? I can't do it directly, but I can look at the object. Let me just find that. Yes. So in here somewhere there'll be. Here we go. So you make the interest. And this is a interface. Interfaces are very useful. Do look them up. They're ideal for this kind of thing. So we get the AI controller that says, hey, I want this to be my interest. We check that that hasn't already happened, which kind of makes sense, right? And then we add it to this interested AI, which are interested in a big array. And then the next thing that comes after that is assigning roles, which is something I've also been working on, which I covered a bit, but I want to see. I go back to check the flow of everything I've been talking about. So that makes sense. I think that kind of covers this new system of transitioning through the stages to get to something being an interest, comparing it to what you have, the two building up an association. That's what was different before. The AI and the behavior tree was having to figure out everything, and there was a lot of constant polling to check if those things were true or not. So that doesn't happen anymore. It's very like event happens, event happens, event happens. We're done. We can stay here. And that gets us to the next thing, right? Which was another thing that the AI couldn't do. Now, as is classic, I've actually broken it again because I'm messing around with other things. But if we just pretend that this works, right? So if we had 3 AI like this, and they all saw this thing at the same time. With the old system, there was no external communication at all and no oversight. So all 3 of them would react in the same way, and they would all rush to this one place and completely ignore each other. Instead, what happens now is they are assigned roles by the object itself. So let's just see where we got to with this. So many things. Where is role assignment? Role assignment is in the source. So yes, here we go. We have the assigning of roles. At the moment, this is super simple, so I don't need to go into too much detail. Basically what we're saying is we go, hey, get the distances of everyone who's interested in this event and sort them by who is closest to furthest. If you're the closest, you are now the person who's going to investigate it. Good job. If you're the second closest, you're what I've just called kind of group leader. From our perspective at the moment, that kind of means stay where you are and say something that sounds important. And anyone else further away is just a bystander, in that they're aware, but they're just basically going to stand there and look around for a bit. Now, there's some trouble with that, which I haven't quite worked out, because it does work, but you have this situation where if we go back to my crappy big whiteboard thing, you have this situation where, so, okay, all these 3 people notice this thing at once, and that works great, right? Because this guy does a thing, this guy does something else, and so on. The problem is, let's say this guy notices it immediately. It's a visual thing. This guy notices it immediately, and this guy in his patrol notices it shortly afterwards. What happens? Is he allowed to take the next role? Should he ignore it? I feel like there's a little grace period which I haven't quite figured out what to do with there. And also the problem is, because the interest source is deliberately fire and forget, it just goes, here are your roles, I'm out of here. I'm not sure of the cleanest way to track that this guy's already searching it. Obviously there are ways to do it, but it means that, now if this guy turns up later, he's going to have to go, hey, is anyone else doing this? Okay, well, I'll take the next available role, which isn't that much more complicated, but my aim is to really strip it down, because the realization is, for this kind of interest source, stuff outside of chasing the player, actually it just needs to be really simple and predictable and reliable, because that's the kind of stuff the player wants to sort of mess with. The more advanced stuff comes from the chasing and the misdirection, not from how they actually react to these things. So I've talked about the sort of role assignment before, but I've cleaned it up a little bit. That's why I showed it, but I won't focus on that too much because the next thing I have been doing is figuring out this state, which is patrolling. So this is a state where there's no interest, there's no player visible, and there's also there's no interest source, and also there's no player visible. So this is just your bread and butter. Oh, guess I should wander around and look important. Now again, I'll go back to man. I need like some kind of digital whiteboard or something for this crap. But so how this worked before was very simple. It was, in fact, you know what? I think this was probably the first thing I ever did, and I was like, you know what? When it's a real problem, I'll change it. And I guess that took a year. So these are little waypoints, very simple. All I did was that I would hard code in here in the scripting thing. It's gone now because obviously I deleted it. By hard code in here, I would just you would just associate one of them with the AI, and when the AI started, it would move to the first one. And in fact, you know what? Why don't I just show it, because I still have the old one. Where he says so many windows, excuse me. Yes. So how did this work before? Right. So I'd use an EQS thing, an EQS query to find the closest waypoint. We should talk about those sometime because EQS is awesome and I don't see enough people use it. Anyway, so I'd find the nearest waypoint if I didn't already have one, but normally the designers would set one up. And then a bunch of stuff that's not too important, but basically they would move to it using the basic move to, and then all that happened was when they arrived at the waypoint, they would say to that waypoint, hey, where's the next one? That's literally the only information one waypoint had was linking to the other one. So if you had your basic back and forth patrol, each waypoint points to the other one, and great. That does work, and as has been discovered, it works for a long time, but there are problems. For example, again, like, hey, what if there are two guys here and, excuse me, I want this one to use, these waypoints and this one to use that one, so they go back and forth and like that. So the fact that the only way to move them around was just to pick the closest point, and then, that's not good enough. Picking the closest isn't always good enough when you've got multiple AI interacting with each other. And what if I want to set up a patrol route that only a certain kind of AI can use? And what if I want to disable them sometimes? Like, what if certain routes aren't available for different reasons, or I want to alter routes? And what if I do want multiple AI to use the same one, but in different manners? And what if I want them to use a different order, for example? Like, I can't think of the good names for these, but do I want him to go this one, this one, this one, then this one, then this one? Because the most logical, well, not most logical, but the easiest way to do, right, is where you just loop. So you go this one, this one, this one, then this one, forever. And actually, you probably don't want that. You probably want, as I said, you go to this one, to this one, to this one, back to this one, and that one. So all that kind of stuff. And the way I wanted to achieve that is, again, the sort of running theme for all of this is to support multiple AI and also take some of the intelligence out of the tree and place it in the world. So in the old school version here, this does everything. Like, this is the stuff I skipped over before there. Like, it says when to turn around. It says which direction I want you to face. It tells you, when to move to the next waypoint. It gets all the new waypoint information. And it tells you how long to wait and what animations play when they turn round. And there's no association between any of the waypoints other than go to the next one. So how am I doing it now? Let's have a look. So many windows. Right. So what I have done is I've made a sort of, it's not quite there yet, but a kind of basic smart object, right? The idea is this thing, which I should totally give it some kind of sweet icon. This thing is a thing that the AI talks to, and this has an array of patrol nodes below it, right? So this I'm calling the patrol object. It needs a way sexier name. I'm taking suggestions. And it's got what I'm calling patrol nodes underneath. Now, how this works is primarily the AI talks to this. The AI says, hey, I wish to associate with you. And again, I want to see if it's, of course, it's not visible here. It's in the thing over. You know what? I can close this one now. I think I'm done laughing at my old work. Let me find it. Excuse me. So many things. Yes. So the patrol object has things like a specific attached AI, and if the route is valid, and the waypoints are looping. So the idea is that if this is empty, in the way I've kind of described for the interest sources, you've got this back and forth. An AI is going to say, hey, I wish to use this route containing these nodes. And the node itself goes, yes, I'm available, or no, I'm not available. But if I am available, the AI now, rather than just looking at each waypoint and saying to each waypoint, hey, which one's next, it says, okay, I've got there. Now this, the object that runs them all, which one's next? So we can see that. Right, so at the moment, again, this is me kind of figuring out the kind of right kind of variables I need, so I'm sure it's going to change, but again, like I like to show the process because otherwise this is illusion that everyone's perfect the first time, which is never true. So at the moment, I'm using the index. The index is actually a key that I am keeping. So I say to this object running all of them, I say, hey, I'm at this index. What's the next one? And then it tells me which is the next one. Well, I say it tells me. So how it does it, well, let's just look. It's very simple. So from my behavior, from my Blackboard, I have my patrol object, and I say, hey, this patrol object that I'm talking to, yeah, you see, I get next object. I'm like, hey, this object, I'm here. Where to next? And it then directly just sets the value on the Blackboard and says, this one next. We're done here. Now, why that's useful or will be useful later is because if we go to here where it gets the next index, at the moment, this is just the basic one, right? It's like, hey, which index are you at? Okay, add one. Are you at the end? If you are, go back to the start. So it's just a basic loop. But later on, when I work out how to do this, because it's certainly my weakness, this kind of manipulation of stuff. But later on, I'll be able to say, okay, well, which kind of loop is it? You know, is it for want of a better phrase, like a ping pong, like to this end, to this end, to this end, or is it a loop where you're going to go all the way around? Or does it only run once, or there are some other kind of limitations? And the thing is here, right? Now this patrol object is going to handle all this, which means I don't have to put this huge amount of stuff in the AI tree that isn't going to be used most of the time. It just trusts the object. Right, back in here. So we do that, and then we get the location of this new index, and then we move to that target, just using the straight up standard move to. And then this is the other bit that's different, and I'm not quite sure about. So before I said that the actual running of what's at the waypoint, like the waiting there, which animation to play, if you turn to face one direction or another, that was all in the tree here. That's nice and it's readable, but I feel like it's control that should probably be like just in the world. So my aim now is that I just have this process patrol node thing. And how this works is when it's executed, I basically say, hey, use the index we've got to find the node that we're actually wanting to use. And then do your thing. So you can see here at the moment, I say I've just got a couple of tasks. I just say, hey, we're definitely not complete because we're just starting. Set the facing direction when you get there and wait this amount of time. And then when you're done waiting and you're done all the stuff, you change this bool. And from the behavior trees perspective, what happens is, get back there. What happens is, so the normal execute, right, is it goes, hey, do this and please do your tasks. And then this is, I can't think of a cleaner way to do this. And it's fairly readable, so I'm certainly going to keep it for the time being. But what I do is I go, okay, fire that off, and then while that is running, what I will do is every tick, every AI tick, which I believe is different. I think the tasks have a certain tick. I really should look this up because I've said this more than once. But anyway, then what I do is I basically just keep polling that node and be like, are you done yet? Are you done yet? Are you done yet? Which is, yeah, okay. It's not ideal, but it works, and I think it's okay for now. It's something to check into later. But that basically means that from the tree's perspective, it's obviously simpler and it's deliberately hands off. So it just goes, look, when I run this task, do whatever. I'm trusting you, the waypoint, to have sensible instructions that you can carry out. And if we're really lucky, this part actually works, because I think this is literally just where I left it beforehand. Oops. So let's see. So we have our waypoints here, and they don't have, so they have their own wait times, they have their own facing directions. The facing directions is not working. I don't know why, fun times, but the point is the data is there. It's not kept anywhere else. And the assumption is if I set it to none, that I mean don't change it. But crucially, they don't point to each other. This is the only thing that knows about it, right? So you've got your elements of your array, you've got your 3 elements, and I say that it's looping, and I'm not actually checking the validation of it yet, but that's something I'm going to use later. So I think, let's see, does it work? Okay, I think it works. I'm just going to check if it goes to the next one. Okay, so we can then flip over to the old behavior tree and see this happening. So, well, you do need multiple screens, and I'm so used to having them. Oops. Damn it. Yeah. Okay. I fit these. I can fit the bottom bit, can't I? Maybe. Find out. Yeah, that's the only bit that matters, really. So you can see he's just moving 2 because he's got the location of that. And then hopefully in a minute he's going to arrive. And then from this thing's perspective, nothing happens. It just waits until it's finished, right? And so on and so forth. So that's nice. That's going to be flexible because I would have stick in loads of them. And also, crucially, if I wanted another AI to have another one that overlapped or was similar, it wouldn't be a problem. And I'm hopeful that I'm going to be finished with the sort of first pass on that pretty soon, because then I can already see that it opens the door for lots of cool stuff we'd want to do, like I was hinting at earlier. Like, for example, some patrol paths are only valid for certain classes of enemies, right? I don't know, like the higher end guards, will stay to the fancier platforms and stuff like that. I don't know. I've got a bit detached from that side of it and trying to get buried into this. But the idea is it'll be easy to manage who uses them. We already had loads of problems in the demo where we couldn't have AI close together because they couldn't have different waypoints and they couldn't have different patrols. And also it wasn't very predictable. But this seems to work okay, I think. So I think that mostly covers where I am. What is still to do? So there's a couple of things that I really want to do, and I'm hoping to kind of polish off some of them this week. And that is getting rid of all these stupid tags where I put these in here because I was like, oh, well, I need to keep the old ones till I'm sure. So I named them these dumb things. That all just needs to be cleared out. The only thing that always puts me off doing it is a lot of them are, if let's find one somewhere, is actually it will be in things like, where will it be? It'll be like this sort of stuff. Yes, where I have, see, I've got these values, I'm just hard coding these values to these keys. So if I rename them, they won't automatically get renamed here. So anyway, that's the whole thing. I want to look into that. I'm considering, as I said, building this into a single struct, but I think that might make things more complicated than it's worth, because then I think I need to make new decorators to break it open and look at it. So it's kind of like makes this a bit neater, but then makes this uglier, which is I'm not sure if that's a good trade. Stuff like that. Also, still haven't tackled actually chasing the player like we did before. I suspect I can probably lift a lot of my old code for that and just sort of clean it up, because now it doesn't have to check for all the other stuff. So that needs some work. These need, the patrol needs some work as well, because it needs to be able to support, it needs to be able to support playing different animations and stuff like that, which we don't have it doing yet. What else is missing from this? Not a great deal. I mean, oh, and the other big worry, and I can just check here as well. Excuse me one moment. What have I got left to do? Yes. Okay. So the target behavior, as I mentioned, that's something that definitely still needs to be done. The other thing is these behaviors for investigating, group leader, bystander, they need a bit more meat on them. They're basically just kind of like functionally different, but they don't, they don't do much. They don't even do as much as they did before. They don't use any EQS to move around and pick cool locations. They just literally go do something slightly different to what the other guy's doing. So there's a bit of stuff to do there. Some stuff I can probably port over. And yes, two more things. One, last known position. The whole idea of, it leaving a ghost where the player last saw you. That's more complicated now because dropping down the visual is easy because we have that event. I mean, it's pretty much based on, I can show you in fact where it goes, right? It's pretty much based on, hey, is it something you saw? And oops, actually it'll be higher up than that. Sorry, it'd be higher up the tree. It would be graph. It would be at this point, you'd be like, hey, is it something you saw? Did you just stop seeing it? Well then, hey, boop, that's where that goes. The complication comes into, because that's kind of old meeting the new, in that my old system, that's fine, it didn't care about anything else. But now, is the last known position, is that an interest source? I don't know, because no one else should be able to notice it. But I can filter based on that, so I'm not sure. That's something I've got to figure out. And finally, related to actually testing all of this stuff is robust, obviously, is I need some debug tools. I don't have any, and I always put this stuff off. So this time I will not. For example, like when this was running, it would be great to see all the names of, the name of this waypoint, how much longer it's got to wait there, and some kind of visual representation of these things being linked together, all that kind of stuff. And I don't have it yet, so that's going to be fun to look at. I'm pretty sure, I'm just going to check my list. I think that's everything I wanted to cover today. I said these ones are less stringent, so I kind of just talk about what I've done, and if it comes up short, it comes up short, and if it's a bit longer, that's hopefully not a problem. Let's have a look. I'm looking through my tasks. Yeah, I think that's basically everything and where I stand with it at the moment. So I think that'll do. So thank you very much for watching. Just to remind everyone, I do a stream every Thursday, every Tuesday. The times tend to be, I'm aiming to always do them either before or after Epic stream. At the moment, I'm doing it at the same time because they weren't doing it today. Please let me know if you have any questions via the forums, via Twitter, anything else. Please check out our awesome website, siegeandsandfox.com. I'm going to check that. This is embarrassing. I should know that. It is, siegeandsandfox.com. In fact, look, you have to see this because pretty. Yes, I know I have a lot of tabs. Quiet to you. Ooh. Please do come check that out. We also, I thought that was a direct link to it. We also have a thing on Chucklefish's page now. So we have forums there. Please just come say hello. And I'd love to get questions, and I'd love to focus something specifically on anything you guys are looking for. But I think that's going to do it for today. So thank you very much for stopping by. I'll be back next Tuesday. Bye.